I'm going to title this little short thought In Good Times and in Bad. And the inspiration for this is ready for it. My daughter got married 2 days ago on Monday this week. So, you guys, bad news. Well, I don't know, maybe bad news, good news for me, bad news for you if you hate photos, but you're going to see them. So here we go. So you're the first, actually. I haven't even published this. Is the photographer sent us a couple of little snippets. So here are some of the photos. It was an outdoor wedding. Came really close to raining and it didn't, which meant the weather was perfect because no one was glaring into the sun. Wasn't too hot. There's my wife and my two sons. They sort of walked down just before us. And there's my daughter, Olivia, my oldest child, and she got married. There's me walking down the aisle with her. And here's a couple of extra shots there. It was a really cool. We got some friends who have a really nice property nearby, and they graciously let us use it for this wedding. And so we set up this thing, and then anyway, there's the newlyweds, and they're off on honeymoon now. They went to Japan, of all places. My daughter loves history, so she's really fascinated with world history. So anyway, they're over there doing their thing, which is totally awesome. But it made me think and made me reflect, and because I've obviously known this wedding is been coming up for a while now. It's been they actually got engaged early in the year, so it's sort of been the whole year in process. And so I've had this wedding on the horizon, but to be honest, this year for me has been really tough. It's actually been a really tough year. And it started late December last year. So, all within the space of a year, I had a really good friend of mine who was a colleague. He was about 10 years older than me, and he was a bit of a mentor to me in some regards, but became a really close mate. He's actually my first ever PhD student, which was a bit odd, but he tragically drowned down at the beach with his kid. He was snorkeling with one of his sons. And then I took the eulogy for his funeral, and his name was Paul. He's very involved in the lifestyle medicine community, and it was just a great loss. And so that sort of the end of the year was actually a really tough one at the end last year. And then in the midst of that, I'd known my all the time. My dad was becoming increasingly unwell. He'd had prostate cancer for 23 years, in fact, and about it would have been last May, a year ago. He was doing. I mean, if those who have done the Lift project, you see in lesson two, you actually see me riding with my dad, and he was just a super active guy. He'd ride like 100 kilometers, like 60 miles, get up in the morning and go for a ride, and then it was May 2024 where all of a sudden things started to deteriorate pretty quickly. And by Christmas time, he was not in a good place. So, I've got my mate I just lost, and then dad's declining. And then it was just a really heavy 6 months pretty much. And dad passed away. Oh, I feel every time I think about it, I actually feel sad again. But in May of this year. And you know what? I had this thing going through my head. I don't know if you've seen the movie Four Weddings and a Funeral, but this thing just kept going through my brain. Instead of four weddings and a funeral, four funerals and a wedding, because I knew I had this wedding coming up, and I'm thinking, no, 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 two's enough, two's enough, two's enough. But then my really close colleague, her mum, who was an elderly mum, so it was a little bit less taxing, but she passed away. And then we had one of the kids in our community who's really grown up with my kids, and she got desperately unwell. She had lung issues. She was in ICU for 3 weeks, and the whole time I'm going, no, 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 not this. Don't let this be the fourth one. Don't let this be the fourth one, please, please. And anyway, she pulled through, and she was one of she was actually the maid of honor in my daughter's wedding. So we actually, my wife was sitting beside her, and at one point Sarah started crying, and I thought, oh, this is to be expected. And she actually made the call. It wasn't about losing Liv, not that we were losing Liv, but it was about the fact that Ebony this was standing there up the front. We just didn't think that was going to happen. So she pulled through, but then one of my other colleagues, older colleague, actually lost someone very close to him, and so I remember sitting, and I was in this fourth funeral for the year, and then I'm just thinking, wow, what a year it's been. So 2025, although there's this beautiful sort of climactic moment, it's actually been a really tough year in many ways, and it's made me reflect a whole lot on what life, what it looks like to live a life well, all this well-being stuff. And I think, the takeaway coming away from it, I've got three really brief things I'd love to share, and then we get to have a chat about it. The first little thing that I'd like to share, first thought that comes from it is that, you know what? Life ain't always blue skies, is it? And I think that, we often, particularly sometimes within the well-being space, within the positive psychology space in particular, there's almost like it presents as like, yeah, it's just everything's happy and rosy and fine and dandy. And the truth is, sometimes life ain't like that. And yeah, and I would much have preferred the ratio to have been the other way. I think we all accept the fact that, life has tough times as well. But I certainly would have rathered have gone to four weddings and one funeral this year. But, sometimes life doesn't go like that. And what do you do in that scenario? Well, what's really interesting is that I've actually found myself more emotional than I've ever been, for obvious good reasons. But even despite the sad times, and there's been a lot of them, you still have these moments of joy in there. And it's a really interesting sort of scenario that I've experienced in a more profound and deep way than I ever have before. And I'm reminded and come across the research on that, which sort of shows that, it's not like there's only good, that you're feeling bad or you're feeling good, and that, you have these extended periods of bad and then it goes good until something bad happens again. There is a fair bit of research showing that these things can simultaneously exist. That, even in the bad. And in fact, what's interesting from a well-being perspective, they actually find that being able to sort of coexist, even in those sort of darker times, looking for and finding those moments of joy, but not discounting or denying the sadness as well, is actually a very mature way to approach our emotional life. And in fact, what they've found is that being able to balance those two and acknowledge those two, and not sort of push the bad aside and say no, 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 I'm not going to go there. There's actually, from a well-being perspective, even when it looks at things like how it relates to people's physical health outcomes and even life expectancy, there's value in that. And so I found myself being quite intentional with that. Even like, when towards the end for dad, when it was just, it was really desperately sad moments but we had moments where we actually did laugh together, where we took, and I remember really savoring them at that moment and going, is this disrespectful to be, having these sort of little bits of pockets of joy? No, it's not. It actually, it's there's value in that. So, so my first takeaway is that, life isn't always blue skies. And sometimes when the skies might be blue for you, they're definitely going to be grey for someone else as well. And so, I think being mindful of that's a really helpful thing. The other thing is that, I find, I feel like I'm bearing my soul today. So take it for what it's worth. But I actually feel like I'm at a really interesting stage of life, that I see life in a very different way, because of where I'm positioned. And why I say that, like I'm 55 years old. So I look at my daughter, and I look at my sons, and they're at university, and one's getting married, another one's engaged. My Lodgy, my oldest son, he's engaged, getting married in the middle of next year. And I said to my younger son Caleb, "Slow down, man, slow down." But anyway, I look at them and it's growth, and it's flourishing, and it's all their fun times. They're at uni, having the time of their life. And I look at that and I go, that was yesterday. Like literally, it feels like yesterday. And then I look this direction and I look at, I've just lost dad, and, there's mum, and, that whole, and I go, that's tomorrow. Like, and I feel like I'm in this really interesting little sort of zone in between the two. And what you realize is that all you've got is now. Like this is it. And I've actually found myself, I use that word again, savoring, really taking in the moments. Like at the moment, all the kids were home last week, before the wedding. All the kids were home, and I said to Sarah, this is the last time that we've got all three of our kids home from uni, because often often their thing, all under the one roof, and like, you know what? I'm just savoring it. And like any time that we were sitting around and there was people were chatting and it was dinner time, I've got a list of 100 things I was going to be doing or should be doing. I'm like, nah. I'm just going to be here, I'm just going to be present. And I think that, yeah, I think that it's helped me. I think, I feel like I'm here to learn. And one of the things I've learned is the value in actually just really being present. And, we all know about the wellbeing literature on that, about that whole idea of being mindful, which is really mindfulness is about being present. It's about, it's about just this, whatever's before you right now, just this, being in that moment and processing that. So it's enjoying the now. I think that's become a lot more real to me. And then the final thing that I would say is that even in the times when we had these tirade of funerals, I always knew that, hey, we got this wedding coming, and I found that incredibly hopeful, and that gave me a lot of comfort in knowing that. And I love this image. I actually, when I was sort of preparing this little slideshow this morning, I came across this image, and it reminded me. I thought I've had this moment because I remember I was down in Sydney. I was in the city, and I was waiting for someone, and I looked down, and in the side of the pavement, and all this, you know city landscape and that, there was this shoot of greenery coming up. And I thought to myself, you know what? Life does want to live, doesn't it? And it's this, this striving, there's growth, there's all that stuff, that's there. And even in the midst of, cracks in the pavement. And for me, I thought, this whole idea of there can be there can be renewal. There's hope beyond the loss and sadness, and I've drawn comfort from that. And so you know what? I have rambled a bit today, maybe, and sort of bared my soul, and maybe it's just me sharing some of my reflections. But I wonder what that's like for you. And so I've got a couple of reflection questions here that I'd love to spend a bit of time and take the opportunity to chat about. So, and the first one being, in your life, have you had time where you've sort of simultaneously experienced joy and sorrow? And how did you handle that mixed emotion? Did you allow yourself to feel both, or did you tend to try and suppress the bad one normally, or maybe the good one because you felt guilty about feeling that way? So that's reflection number one. Number two, looking back, when have life's ups and downs increased your appreciation for the present moment? I wonder whether you've had that experience and how that may have affected you. And then last of all, after a loss or some sort of difficult season in life, have you noticed a seed of new possibility, growth or merging, or meaning that may have emerged from that? It's interesting. My dad, he was an incredible, like, we made a plaque for him, and he was really involved in helping set up all these walking trails around the university campus that I'm based on. And he built all the chairs. They've got these sort of special benches that people can sit on as they're walking around. And so we put a plaque on the back of it. And I put the little inscription because I wanted it said, he was happiest when helping others, because that was him. That was my dad. And I thought, what one thing, like right now I spent all week it's setting up marquees and doing this and wedding decorations, and it's just like I was actually exhausted last night, slept really, really well. Um, and I thought, this is part of my dad's legacy. He taught me that, to give everything to your kids, to look out for them. And I thought, that's sort of that's that green bud that's come out of, yeah, I don't know if I'm articulating that well. But anyway, have you maybe experienced that, even out of this has grown something good? What might that have looked like for you?